webinar today, so you will be able to find that recording after the fact. It'll take us a couple days to get that uploaded, and we'll also share the slides from this presentation. I'm Rihanna Bokhari. I'm TRISH's Scientific Research Director, and I'm joined today by Dr. Lonnie Peterson and Dr. Jonathan Lees to give us some information about dual anonymous peer review and also some background on the science for this particular solicitation. So we have a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to jump right in and get started. So this solicitation is focused on direct intracranial pressure monitoring. And this is just an agenda, and we'll go over what it is, what TRISH is, and also answer some questions. There will be time at the end of this webinar to answer questions from the community. If you have any questions, please make sure to put those into the Q&A function. If you put it in the chat, we will not answer it. So if you put it in the chat, please then go put it into the Q&A function. And I also want to let people know that it's okay to share your information in the chat if you're trying to collaborate, if you're trying to find additional collaborators. So that's absolutely fine. You can share your information in the chat. And we'll talk more about that in a later slide. So a little bit of background on TRISH. So the TRISH, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, is a cooperative agreement with the NASA Human Research Program. Our purpose is to complement NASA's efforts in reducing human health risks, and we try to take different approaches or do high risk, high reward or disruptive new ways to reduce human health risks. And so this solicitation is actually a very nice example of trying to try a new way to reduce human health risks. The TRISH's EXPAND program is our commercial spaceflight research program. And EXPAND is really, the vision is really to improve the knowledge base of human adaptation to spaceflight by studying additional people that are beyond our very healthy and well-trained astronauts. And so that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the individuals that are going to space in these commercial flights, but they are not necessarily, maybe not quite as healthy as our typical astronaut, or maybe don't have quite as much training just because of time. You know, it's not their full-time job. And so we're also taking advantage of these flights that are happening outside of the normal NASA flights, and taking an opportunity to collect data on these individuals that may come from slightly different backgrounds. So this is a procurement mechanism. EXPAND represents a different procurement mechanism. We actually have an open solicitation for other EXPAND projects right now that we are not going to talk about today, but we will show you a link to that solicitation. If you want some more information about EXPAND, those resources will be outside of here. But just to give you a little bit of basic information, we will have a database associated with EXPAND. It's openly available for seeing the kind of data that's in there, and we will have the database open for, or we hope to have the database open for inquiry for data requests towards the end of this calendar year. EXPAND is uniquely quick in terms of scientific review and the process of getting scientific projects from the start point to spaceflight itself. That's partially because commercial spaceflight is just a little bit of a faster timeline than we're typically used to with NASA projects. So additionally, there's a lot of international participation in these commercial spaceflights that are going on. And so thus EXPAND works with these international partners. And again, this database and sample repository will be available at a later date. So that's some basic background information about EXPAND. We're happy to answer questions about EXPAND, but it's important to note this program is the support program for this solicitation. So the intracranial pressure solicitation is for a very specific kind of study, but it will be a part of the EXPAND program. So that's why we're telling you about EXPAND here. And so data from this project will go into the EXPAND database. And just a little bit of basic information about EXPAND. We work with multiple commercial spaceflight providers, the ones listed on the left. And pretty much if someone is sending people to space, we try to work with them. And then obviously the data is usable, data and technology that comes out of Expand is usable by the partners on the right. We want to make sure we clarify some potential, some differences between commercial spaceflight and typical NASA spaceflights that you may not have considered already. So again, they have the same relevant hazards like altered gravity, isolation, and confinement, and that closed and hostile environment. However, the demographics are a little bit different between your regular, highly screened NASA astronaut, where being an astronaut is their job, and these general public individuals that are really going up often for one time, or maybe they're a government sponsored from somewhere outside of the US, or maybe even a launch operator employee. Typical mission duration for commercial space flights is under 30 days, and 30 days is more than any flight has gone so far. Most flights, especially orbital flights, are usually under 5. NASA flights are these days, 6 to 12 months, depending upon the mission. Obviously, the early Artemis missions to the moon will be a little bit less. They're more like 14 days, but of course, late Artemis is much, much longer. The frequency is also really important to note for commercial space flights versus NASA space flights. Commercial space flights happen when they happen, and that's at approximately 6 times a year for orbital and private astronaut missions to the International Space Station. Now, that cadence could increase or decrease based on the needs or based on the community that is interested in going. And so we cannot plan exactly for a mission to absolutely happen. So that happens at the need of the commercial spaceflight participant or commercial spaceflight providers. So TRISH is not in control of that information. Whereas NASA, they have about 14 missions a year to the ISS, and potentially 4 to 6 per year even for Artemis. And so that cadence is a little bit more regular and has a different purpose. So just keeping in mind that frequency is a little bit different between commercial and NASA. It's also important to note that your NASA astronaut has a lot of time to train and preparation for spaceflight, whereas commercial spaceflight participants are, typically coming in for training at a much shorter time frame in preparation for their flight. And they of course do training, but they have a regular day job, so that's not their full-time job. So it's important to remember when you're designing these types of experiments, you have to remember that the person doing the experiment is unlikely to have gobs and gobs of time to prepare. And so it has to be a relatively straightforward project. So this slide just tells you some basic other information about Expand. We have an Expand website that you can go to, and the QR code is above. We have the Expand Exploratory Studies solicitation that you can go to, and the link is here. So when we release these slides, you can click on that link if you have trouble finding it by just Googling it. Also, the TRISH Broad Institute announcement has information about what TRISH is actually interested in funding, just in general. And that QR code is above. So you can find all the information about Expand through these resources, and I believe they're also being dropped into the chat. So if you would like to find them there, you can. So that gives us some background about Expand and commercial spaceflight in general. We are happy to answer any questions you have about commercial spaceflight, but we're going to go in and talk about a little bit more about the RFP itself. And I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Peterson to tell us a little bit about SANS.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. So this specific solicitation, the main risk and the knowledge gaps that we're trying to meet with this solicitation are that of the spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS. Many of you, most of you, all of you will likely be aware that SANS is a new and improved acronym, a term for this cluster of symptoms and findings. We used to refer to this as VIIP, which had the word intracranial pressure in there. And so I mentioned this to give you some background for why we're releasing this specific solicitation. Currently, SANS, the syndrome, as mentioned, is a cluster of symptoms and findings. The diagnostic criteria, though, is based on that of optic disc edema. This is classified and graded based on the Friesen grade, which basically quantifies the amount of edema and how much this expands and includes how much of the circumference of the optic nerve head is included in the edema formation. The worse, the higher the Friesen grade. How SANS is diagnosed right now is more than one Friesen grade. This is evaluated through fundoscopy, and so you'll see Peggy holding a camera to her eye, and this is to diagnose that. Of other clinical findings that are included in the syndrome are choroidal thickness, so engorgement of the vascular beds at the back of the eye, choroidal folds, which you see in this fundoscopy image here as sort of wavy lines at the back of the eye. We also see globe flattening, and ultimately these changes lead to a shift in the visual acuity, so hyperoptic shift, plus 1.75 as it relates to the diagnostic criteria of SANS. As mentioned, the role of changes in the intracranial pressure is debated. We're trying to help that debate along, maybe even close it out with this solicitation. I'll turn it back to you, Rihanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very helpful explanation. So again, if anyone has questions about SANS and the reason we're doing this solicitation, please drop those into the question and answer function. So diving into the specifics on the solicitation itself. So direct intracranial pressure monitoring, this came out in March of 2025, and we expect proposals will be due on March 15th. May 15th, apologies, May 15th, 2025. We estimate selection of proposals in September of 2025 with an anticipated start date of also September of 2025. This notice of funding is focused on direct ICP measurements. And so essentially we're looking for folks to use direct ICP measurements in a potential commercial spaceflight participant. And secondarily, the secondary objective is to include a non-invasive method of, at least one non-invasive method of intracranial pressure estimation, because we know that there are many of those that have been done in the past or are under investigation now. We want to be able to compare, especially to historical data that exists. Much larger amount of data exists on indirect or non-invasive ICP measurements. So we want to be able to compare to those existing data. So, like I said, the primary objective of this solicitation is to do direct intracranial pressure measurement in real time using an implantable device. So this may use a telemetric implantable device, or could provide and must provide continuous or intermittent ICP measurements throughout a space mission. And so it's really also important to note here that while we're talking about doing an invasive or an implantable device, we are talking about prioritizing astronaut safety as well. This must be considered in every part of the application. So I'm going to go through the required and preferred characteristics here. And so apologies for the fact that this will be a little bit of reading off slides, but it's important to note everything in its more exact, exactly. So it's important to note that the implanted portion of the device must remain fully sealed and cannot physically connect with an external device. The device must measure ICP in real time through either a cranial approach, and that could include an intraventricular or intraperitoneal device, or a spinal intrathecal device approach. So one of those two approaches is fine. Pressure data must be transmitted through an external receptor. The device must be capable of data recordings that are either continuous or intermittent with long enough intervals to allow for waveform recording and analysis. The proposed device must provide an accurate and reliable measurements of small ICP changes. So we know that there's not unlikely to be clinical levels of changes in folks in space, or may not be clinical levels of changes in folks in space. So we want to be able to make sure the device is capable of capturing potentially small changes if they're there, and be able to collect a suitable and be suitable for collecting high frequency waveform analysis data, and justify how that sampling frequency would be used for waveform analysis. So it's important to justify why the sampling frequency is sufficient for the need. And then, well, as far as FDA approval, if a device is already FDA approved, then that has a different requirement, of course. We would love to see an FDA approved device, but of course we know that many devices are not FDA approved yet. And so if it's on the path to FDA approval or investigational device exemption or IDE testing, there must be a plan for that testing. So every proposal will be asked to include a plan for regulatory approval. And if the device already has FDA approval, then that plan should be clear about that. And the plan should very clearly discuss any IDE testing or FDA approvals that are ongoing and how that will impact the science being done. And so the validation of the device on the ground or in parabolic and suborbital flight must be addressed in the proposal, as that plays a vital role in assessing the feasibility and effectiveness of the proposed tool in a real-world scenario. So this could include testing in an appropriate animal model if needed. That is allowed. It's important to consider timeline, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So a few more required characteristics. The device must be able to withstand the unique environmental conditions of space. That includes hypergravity and in launch and landing, which can be, a little bit, it's not like a walk in the park. Microgravity, of course, and potential radiation exposure. Now, the individuals are always shielded by the vehicle they're in, but they do get some radiation exposure. So your device would need to be able to withstand some small amount of radiation exposure. And we are just looking for assurance of functionality throughout the mission. Research plans should include centrifuge testing with MRI before and after the implant placement, unless this has otherwise been previously conducted. The device must have a user-friendly interface. Please remember that the folks that are on these missions are really interested in participating in science typically, but they may not have the same experience as a physician does in terms of using a device. So we want to make sure they have a user-friendly interface that would enable an astronaut to operate it and obtain results seamlessly. Preferred characteristics, the device, in an ideal world, the device should be able to collect cerebrospinal fluid, but before and after or during spaceflight, using no more than a small puncture site. However, this is a preferred characteristic, not a required characteristic. In proposals that do not meet one of the listed required characteristics above will be declined without review. So we will not review a proposal that doesn't meet all of the required characteristics. So the secondary objective of this solicitation is to do non-invasive ICP estimation measurements. And so these are using techniques that should already be compatible with spaceflight or compatible with potential deployment in spaceflight with limited additional preparation. So we're not looking for people to come with necessarily the newest idea for ICP estimation. We're looking for existing tools, ideally, that are capable of being deployed relatively quickly. Required characteristics for the non-invasive ICP estimation measurements are devices or methods must estimate ICP non-invasively and provide a real-time information. Techniques must be shown to provide reliable estimations demonstrated by significant preliminary data. So we need to see preliminary data here. The device or method must be able to withstand the unique environment of space, which includes microgravity, radiation, and ensure functionality during the mission. And the technique should be user-friendly and enable operators to easily record results. Preferred characteristics, a multimodal non-invasive ICP assessment would be great to have multiple methods. Multiple methods are not required, but it is preferred if you come with more than one method of non-invasive ICP measurement. Proposals that do not meet one of the required characteristics above will be declined without review. Okay, so now we're going to switch topics and talk a little bit about the flight itself. So flight opportunities are dependent upon the schedule of the flight providers. So TRISH does not control the schedule. We are just bringing a project to the table when they are interested in flying. So we have to have that tool ready to go. So we are looking at missions that are orbital free flyer missions that are typically approximately 3 days nominally and up to 5 days in a contingency. So these are short flights, and we are targeting orbital missions for this solicitation. It's important to note the unique constraints of commercial spaceflight that I have noted a little bit earlier, but limited lead time prior to the flight. There is usually not a lot of lead time before the flight. So we would have a project in place and ready to go. And when the flight is announced, then we can say here, flight provider, we would like you to consider this for going to the crew for consent, see if they are interested in participating. Limited or no opportunity for crew training. So this has to be a very easy to use tool for crew to be able to implement in space. There are typical operational constraints. You do not have a traditional laboratory setup. I cannot give you the specific dimensions of any particular craft, but suffice it to say that there is a very small limited space on any of these crafts, and you do not have your traditional laboratory. All right, and so we also have limited or unconventional crew cabin volume. So like I said, I can't give you the specifics, but the cabin volume is typically very small. So there are 2 phases for this solicitation. The first is the flight definition phase. The second is the flight implementation phase. The flight definition phase is all activities that are needed prior to flight. So this includes pre-flight safety and validation studies that are as needed. And of course, those will be detailed in the proposal per the solicitation itself. Purchasing of materials, hardware readiness, and delivery and support to the flight provider prior to any mission announcement. So we must clarify, so you should be, in your proposal, you should clarify which activities will be included in this phase. So by the end of the flight definition phase, the project should be flight ready to be added to the manifest at short notice. So this phase can last up to 1 year. However, it's important to note that a shorter flight definition phase may provide more opportunity for flight. So if you have a 1-year flight definition phase and there's a flight that happens during that time, you will lose the opportunity to be on that flight. So of course, the sooner the flight definition phase is over, then the faster you have opportunities for flight. All data sharing and use agreements must be signed and institutional review board approvals obtained in order to complete this flight definition phase. So the flight implementation phase, it's important to note again that flight opportunities are outside of TRISH's control. This begins after a mission is announced and has a subject pool with the opportunity to consent to the project. So if there is no mission announced, the flight implementation phase will not begin. If there is no subject pool that has the opportunity to consent to this project, then the flight implementation phase will not begin yet. So it is important to note that it's possible that there is a gap between the flight definition phase and the flight implementation phase if there is no flight that could potentially carry this device or this project. In order to advance to the flight implementation phase, a project would need to successfully complete the flight definition phase as determined by TRISH and have their project hardware accepted by the flight provider. This is really important because there's occasionally things that happen where a hardware is unable to be used by a flight provider, or it can't meet the needs, it can't be certified, can't be accepted by the flight provider. And if the flight provider says that they cannot accept the project or the hardware, then the flight implementation phase will not begin. And the budget associated with that will also not be awarded. Also, a proposer must comply with all TRISH investigator requirements. So this is just a visual for folks to note the flight definition. So if a project is selected for this solicitation, the flight implementation or the flight definition phase will be awarded. And if successful, then the flight implementation phase may be awarded. So it's important to note that the flight implementation phase is not guaranteed. It will only happen if there is a possibility of the flight happening. So some examples of what would go in the budget for the flight definition phase would be, your pre-flight validation studies, purchase of hardware, your preparation for the flight. And in flight implementation phase, that would include things like surgery and support from the PI to support the hardware certification with the flight provider, and personnel training as needed, and as well as data analysis. So all of that would be in budget phase 2. So this, hopefully this diagram will help understand that demarcation point. This phase includes, I already said that, so that's great. So the flight implementation phase budget is only awarded if a project is selected for flight. So if a project could be funded in the flight definition phase and not the flight implementation phase. So this phase is not guaranteed. It is very possible that there will be no flight that is capable of carrying this project. And so then the flight implementation phase will not happen. But I should note that should a project complete the flight definition phase and there not be a flight implementation or a possible flight for that flight implementation, the flight definition phase is still completed. And even at a later time beyond the timeline of this project, it is very possible that a flight provider could come and say, we really want to do this project, even though it's beyond the timeline of this award. And so then there would support for that would be at the PI's discretion, but of course it doesn't remove the possibility of that ever flying. So if flight definition phase is completed, flight can happen even after the possible timeline of this solicitation. So for award information itself, proposers should detail the expected costs of conducting the research. That includes direct and indirect costs, and that total time for the award is up to 2 years, and that includes the flight definition phase and flight implementation phase. It's important to note that a budget for each phase is required, and you can divide the budget and the time unevenly across the different years. So if you want to have a 6-month flight definition phase and a 1.5-year flight implementation phase, that's acceptable. If you want to do a 1-year flight definition phase and a 1-year flight implementation phase, that is also acceptable. And budgets should plan to support only one flight. This is not likely to go up on more than one flight. Again, the closer a project is to flight readiness, the longer it will remain in the queue, and thus the more likely it is to fly. Okay, so I'm going to go over a few FAQs, and then I will turn it over to the next piece of this presentation. So when will funding decisions be made? November of 2025 at the latest. We anticipate September of 2025 at the earliest. Can I request an extension? We will not give any extensions. There will no extensions will be given. Is there a required format for biosketches? You can use the NIH or NSF biosketch format, but there's no required format. We do post a template if you need one. It's important to note, though, that you have a 2-page limit. So some people's biosketches go much longer than that. So please note the 2-page limit. I cannot find the answers to my questions in the solicitation document or the FAQ. Who do I go to? Please ensure you've read both the solicitation and the FAQ before you come with a question. But you can click on this link here that takes you to the TRISH email, or you can email spacehealth-info@bcm.edu and your questions will be answered. Okay, so I want to point out this particular capability in the solicitation. The link for this spreadsheet is below. The spreadsheet is posted alongside of the solicitation itself. This is a method by which folks can communicate with each other about potentially teaming up. So TRISH cannot team proposers together in the pre-proposal phase, so we will not be able to do that, but you can communicate with each other, and we provided this spreadsheet source. So if you're looking for collaborators, please fill out this any information from this this Excel file, and other collaborators may reach out to you. Please feel free to reach out to people that are looking for collaborators and have stated thus. Like I said, we're more than comfortable with you putting your information in the chat during this webinar to connect with other folks. But we understand that this would be very helpful for matchmaking. We are not going to do matchmaking, but if you would like to put your name in the hat, please go ahead and do that and look for collaborators that way. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, but I just need to change over the presentation. So give me 1 second while I change it over, and then we will get started with the dual anonymous peer review part of this presentation. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. Okay, Dr. Lees, please go ahead and get started. Can you see the presentation? No? Okay, hold on. I must have done something.
Share.
You see it now? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bakari. So I'm going to talk specifically about dual anonymous peer review, otherwise known as DAPR, which will be how you prepare part of your proposal. So why DAPR? A key goal of peer review is to level the playing field for everyone. This is difficult to completely interrupt biases through training alone. It requires structural changes. DAPR aims to create change in the tenor of discussions away from the individuals on the proposing team and toward the proposed science. Next slide, please. Dual anonymous peer review is not completely a blind process. Proposers submit 2 parts, an anonymized proposal part and a not anonymized expertise and resource document. The merit of the proposal, which will be assessed anonymously, will be determined separately from the not anonymized qualifications of the team. Nevertheless, the qualifications, track record, and access to the unique facilities will form part of the evaluation. Next slide, please. When you're submitting the anonymized part of the proposal, please exclude names and affiliations of the proposing team, including in figures and references to personal websites. Use numeric references only, with brackets and the number instead of the author name and the year. Do not claim ownership of past work. Like, for example, do not say my previously funded work or our analyses shown in such and such paper. Cite references in the passive third person, like prior analysis, number 1, indicates that. Also describe the work proposed, like we propose to do the following, or we will measure the effects of. Include a separate non-anonymized expertise and resources document as well. Next slide, please. When you're referencing unpublished works or proprietary results, please follow the following. When it's Occasionally, it'll be important to cite exclusive access datasets, non-public software, unpublished data, or findings that have not yet been presented in public before and aren't citable. Each of these may reveal or strongly imply the investigators on the proposal. In these instances, proposers must use language such as obtained in private communication or from private communication when referring to such potentially identifying work. Recall that the goal of DAPR is to shift the tenor of the discussion, not to make it absolutely impossible to guess the team members. Next slide, please. The review itself will have two parts. The first part will be the science review, which will be looking at the anonymous part of the proposal. This part will be assessed based upon robustness of the outlined scientific plan, the approach, and the implementation and risk mitigation. The second part will be looking at the expertise and resources part, which will be not anonymized. Proposers there will be assessed as either qualified or unqualified. And this part, the expertise and resources review phase may not be used by the panel to reevaluate proposals or to change the assigned adjectival grade. Next slide, please. So we're observing and analyzing other programs as they also adopt and adapt the DAPR approach to peer review. Formal support in NSPIRES is implemented, but is still new. Dual anonymous peer review represents a major shift in the evaluation of proposals, and as such, there may be occasional slips in writing anonymized proposals. However, TRISH reserves the right to return without review proposals that are particularly egregious in terms of the identification of the proposing team. TRISH further acknowledges that some proposed work may be so specialized that despite attempts to anonymize the proposal, the identities of the PI and team members will be readily discernible. As long as the guidelines are followed, TRISH will not return these proposals without review. DAPR has the promise in increasing the focus on the science during reviews and reducing bias. And with that, I'll pass back to Dr. Bakari.
All right, thank you very much. And so I think at this point we are completed with our presentation, and I will open the floor for questions.
Okay. First question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. First question. How many teams are expected to be selected?
We do not have a specific number of teams to be selected, but it would be 1 to 2.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned an implantable device. However, you would like a transcranial, transcutaneous, non-invasive monitor. Please clarify. That's probably going to be towards either Muhammad or Lonnie.
Yes, and I think
Muhammad is here if
lost
he's
Lonnie
able to
for a
answer.
second. So Muhammad, do you mind answering that question for us?
Yeah, absolutely. You would like a transcranial, transcutaneous. Okay, so what that means is you can't have basically like an EVD or a bolt coming out of the skin. The skin needs to be closed over the device.
Okay, thank you. And if you didn't hear that, the skin, you can't have a bolt coming out of the skin. The skin needs to be closed over the device. So, next question.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, can teams propose directly to the secondary objective and not the primary objective?
No, you must propose to both objectives. TRISH is not, we are not going to team after the fact. We are looking for both objectives. So if you're interested in proposing to the second objective, please put your name in the sheet looking for collaborators, or keep your eyes open for potential collaborators.
And the link is also in the chat for those that are interested in going directly to it from the chat. Next question is there a preference for cranial versus lumbar approaches?
There is no preference for cranial versus lumbar approaches. Anything you want to add to that, Mohammed?
No, the safety and quality of the data are the priority. So cranial versus lumbar is not a preference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it necessary to include a direct ICP measurement in the proposal? Is it not possible to propose a specific non-invasive technique instead? I'm not an expert in direct ICP measurement.
So we are aware that there may be some differences in the populations of researchers in the two different categories. We are expecting proposers to team with each other to propose to both topics together. We are not, as stated earlier, we are not selecting for only one of the topics. You must do both.
Okay, won't the flight definition phase need to include implementation in healthy people so that the ground-based testing, which validates the measurement, can be performed? In example, centrifuge.
I think the answer to this question, and Mohammed, you can just jump in if there's anything you want to add, is that yes, that would be in the flight definition phase, any kind of human testing on the ground prior to flight. However, if you're talking about the piece of testing in the individual that may be flying later, the pre-post MRI for that individual and centrifuge, that would have to be done in the individual that is going to fly, unless there's significant data that exists to show that already. Anything you want to add, Mohammed, to that?
No, I agree. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. What is the budget size?
That's a great question. We understand that the nature of the project, the nature of the choice of ICP, and the nature of the choice of monitoring, it will likely be the highly important dictating of the price tag. So we want people to propose their scientific idea and put an appropriate and tell us the appropriate cost of doing that research. So there is no cap, there is no minimum, there is no dollar amount specified, because we know that different approaches will require different amounts of funding. And so we would like to be able to compare scientifically the approaches. It's important to note, though, that at the end of the day, TRISH will consider competitive costs because funding is limited. So we know we will look at that at the end of the day, but we want the scientific merit to be focused on the science.
Okay, thank you. Just to make absolute sure, you're asking for a proposal for a patent ambulatory epidural puncture system in healthy individuals to be deliberately exposed to acute pressure changes during hypergravity analogs in actual orbital flight, even if not FDA approved. IRB nightmare.
Mohammed, that one's for you.
Yeah.
So the first half of that question is does not have to be an epidural puncture system. And Rihanna, we don't need to have the ability to have CSF collection, right? It's a plus.
That's correct. That's a preferred characteristic. It's a plus.
Yeah. So we won't dictate to you how to measure ICP. What you mentioned there, epidural puncture is one possible approach, right? The second half, IRB nightmare. I mean, whatever you do that involves invasive ICP measurement in spaceflight will be challenging on an IRB perspective.
Okay,
that's great.
Thank you. The budget seems to be at the discretion of the investigator. Do you have an estimated range TRISH is seeking to support, as well as the number of projects you anticipate funding?
Earlier, we stated that we anticipate to fund 1 to 2 projects, and again, I will not state that there is no set number. But again, please be clear about the costs and what they are to do the project the right way. And of course, we will weigh the costs at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. What are the ethical considerations for elective burr hole craniotomy in healthy participants for ICP monitoring? Mohammed.
That's a tough one. Basically, we have to be able to justify that whatever information we're getting out of this craniotomy is going to give us enough information to help other people in a way that oversees the risk to an individual. A, and B, we have to show that we have done everything we can to minimize the risk to that individual. Spinal approaches have been looked at. If the insinuation is that spinal approaches may be safer, they've been looked at. They also carry their own risks, right? So cranial versus spinal, they may not necessarily at face value have better safety considerations, but depending on your approach and your design, you might be able to justify that one of them, that your specific approach is safer than other approaches. And that's what we want you guys to do.
Okay, thank you. Can we use a COT system for the primary objective?
That one's a Mohammed question.
Yes.
If you find one, yeah, that'd be awesome. It'll save you a lot of issues with approvals.
Okay, thank you. Can we use multiple different invasive devices?
That is, you want to go ahead, Mohammed?
Yeah, I think if it gives you more data, does not increase the risk to the participant. Like by multiple different invasive devices, I assume you're talking about measuring things other than ICP since you're already there. If you're not increasing the risk to the participant and you get more data, I don't see why not.
Okay, thank you. Are we allowed pre-flight and post-flight measurement on individuals participating to the study regarding especially the non-invasive technique?
Pre and post flight is, as long as it has a scientific purpose, as long as the scientific purpose is to do that objective, meeting one of the objectives, pre and post flight, especially for the non-invasive piece, would be acceptable. Anything you want to add to that, Mohammed?
No, I agree. I think there's likely going to be good scientific merit to pursuing that.
Any more questions? Do we have more?
Yes, we actually do have about 5 more, so hopefully we'll be able to get to all of them.
I think we
Okay.
will.
The next one is, what if there was a minimally invasive way to measure ICP, but it is not intracranial, not intrathecal?
Go ahead, Mohammed.
I think that'd be reasonable, but we have to be absolutely sure that it's actual ICP, right? Because all the non-invasive options right now are not direct ICP measurements. They're ICP estimates or surrogates. We're not looking for an estimate or a surrogate. We're looking for a direct measurement. If you have a novel approach to do that, that is a direct measurement, by all means.
And yes, we understand that that would be potentially violating that one line, but as long as it falls into an actual ICP measurement capability, if that's possible, then maybe an exception could be made. But like we said, you'd have to actually do a direct ICP measurement.
Okay, thank you. What about a tool that allows non-clinicians to perform LPs in real time rather than something implantable or completely non-invasive? It sounds like by the definition of the objectives that performing a lumbar puncture is not an acceptable submission, even if it is safer than the traditional approach.
Yes, I'll take that one. So that is not a part of this solicitation, but it is a part of the Expand Exploratory Study solicitation. So I'll refer you to that solicitation. We understand that that is another potential way to get at this problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, non-invasive ICP, does it have to give an absolute value or our range is okay?
Do you want to take that one, Mohammed?
Yeah, no, it does not have to give absolute values. As a matter of fact, if you do give absolute values, you have to show us where that comes from, because to my knowledge, those absolute values that are non-invasive tend to be not very reliable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On one hand, the request for proposal seems to focus on the provision of equipment so as to enable direct ICP measurement, yet the requested project description indicates that we should compile hypotheses, specific aims, research plan, etc. We find this confusing. It would be helpful to clarify whether the application should also include all the land-based experiments that would be considered useful to validate ICP. It's a multiple part question, so if you want to answer that one first.
Sure. So I think that's an excellent question. We understand that we are more or less telling you what the hypothesis and specific aims are based on the what the ask is. So we understand that putting those together will have, that will already be partially dictated by the actual goal of the project. But we still would like you to put together some kind of hypothesis and specific aims. So we have an understanding of what the goals are for that particular project, since they may differ from one method versus another. And I will, what was the second part of the question, Nicole?
So the next statement in question is, we can imagine a variety of tests that may be useful. An example, human centrifuge, parabolic flight. Some of these additional tests could involve aspects such as measurement of blood pressure, sympathetic activity in ICP during a battery of procedures, changes in posture. Should the application include requests for funding for all these experiments, or will these tests be undertaken in conjunction with TRISH?
It's a great question. That may be a part of the solicitation or of the RFP. You are expected to do some benchmarking. Mohammed, do you want to take part of this question? I don't know if you have any more information there.
I think it's not our place to dictate study design, right? We're soliciting something specific with direct ICP monitoring, but for example, to go with centrifuge versus suborbital flight, that's your call. As long as you can justify your methods and you're comfortable with them and you can get them done, then you can propose that method.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there opportunity to instrument more than one direct ICP subject on the flight? And would it be possible to also collect non-invasive measures on the non-instrumented crew members?
Excellent question. I'll answer the second question first. You can collect non-invasive measurements on anyone that consents to that on the flight. And it would be the same for the invasive measurements or the direct measurements. Those would be acceptable to do based on, it would just depend on which subjects are interested in consenting. Jimmy, anything you want to add to that? Are there constraints that I'm not considering there?
No other constraints. Yeah, the nature of commercial space flight, we really have to work with the opportunities that are presented to us. This is why we've divided this particular solicitation between flight definition and flight implementation. And so should you be selected for flight definition, we would work with you directly to help plan for that. And then as the flight opportunities come forward and we understand the potential subject pool, then that's how we will work with you on the flight implementation.
I guess I'll add to that. Crews are typically around 4 individuals, so they're usually not more than that. And so it would depend on what the crews are interested in consenting to. So. Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible to discuss further our concept for a minimally invasive implantable system that measures ICP?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. In terms of discuss it further with TRISH, at this point, the solicitation is out and we can't discuss the competitiveness of any particular proposal with a proposer out of fairness to all other proposers. But if you have specific targeted questions, we can absolutely answer those.
Okay, and last question for the secondary goal of non-invasive ICP measurement, does that also have to be continuously performed? And if so, can the collected raw data be converted to ICP equivalents post-flight, or alternatively, can onboard laptops be used to that end?
I'll let Mohammed answer that question. And if you need, we can answer the laptop thing at the end if you want.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to process it. If so, so does it also have, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I don't believe the No, we do not need continuous monitoring for the secondary goal of non-invasive ICP measurement, right? That goal is primarily for invasive ICP measurement. Onboard laptops we use to that, and I mean, if you can justify it in the experimental design, sure. Brianna, anything specific about that?
Just in general, having additional hardware is obviously, another tax for a space flight. But actually, I'll turn it over to Jimmy to answer the question about the additional hardware.
Yeah, that's what really part of your experimental design is, sort of the trade-off between additional flight hardware to do computational capability, or if your data can be collected and analyzed post mission. So obviously there may be advantages to having in real-time measurements, or there may be benefits to having it post mission. So that is part of your experimental design, is to determine that and put that forward so that we can evaluate it on its merits.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Okay, thank you. Did you do any investigation on whether these commercial astronauts would want to go through this invasive procedure? Sounds like not many would volunteer for this.
Thank you for that question. I think at this point, we are not able to comment on whether a potential subject pool might be or might not be interested in participating in a particular study. So at this point, we can't bias anything that would be a problem for the IRB. Anything that you want to add to that, Mohammed or Jimmy?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
We have a few more questions. If we can get to them, we
okay.
will. Is data acquisition during sleep an option? If so, do astronauts in orbit have the same sleep patterns with respect to sleep stages as on Earth?
It's a great question. I'll turn it over to Mohammed for the data acquisition. If you want to answer the sleep part, go for it too. If not, I can answer it.
I mean, there's a lot of sleep deprivation during spaceflight because people have a lot of things to do. But yeah, how that relates to sleep stages, that's just plan for sleep deprived individuals.
Circadian rhythm disruption as well. But what was the first part of that question, Nicole?
If they can collect data during sleep, which I think is fine.
Okay. So we answered it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't disrupt that sleep, I would say.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Next question is measurement of electrical activity of the brain being considered direct? Would it be considered direct ICP measurement, or must it be a form of millimeters of mercury type measurement?
Mohammed,
It has to be pressure. Whether millimeters of mercury, centimeters of water, pascals, it has to be pressure.
Okay, thank you. Do we have time for one more?
I think you can go ahead and if we need to stay on for another minute or two, I know I can stay, but and we can always answer. All of these answers will be posted on the FAQ. So if any of our group has to drop off and we can't answer a question, we will get back to you, or we will put it in the FAQ.
Okay. Next question, is there a data acquisition system for vital signs available on board to which data from our sensors can be fed as analog signals? If so, is there a computer linked to such a system? If so, can data analysis software be installed on it? So 3-part question.
That's an excellent question. I'll turn it over to Jimmy for that question.
So I'd suggest that in your proposal, you propose the full system that you need. And should there be opportunity during flight implementation phase of your project, we would work with other resources that might be available on that mission to integrate data acquisition. And as you can imagine, that is to be determined. We do not know what that would be because we do not know the future mission or the future crews. So my suggestion is within your proposal, you provide all the capabilities you need to perform the science that you're wanting to propose.
Thank you. Last question. Can you clarify whether the non-invasive methods are required to be real-time? This seems to be a requirement in the solicitation and would preclude post-mission analysis and determination of pressure changes.
Mohammed, do you want to answer that question?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the real-time portion is the measurement portion, not the analysis portion.
Yes, that was our intention with the solicitation.
Exactly. So if you are doing your non-invasive measurement real time, as in collecting it real time, the analysis can wait until they come back, from my perspective.
Agreed. And we also said that, pre-post is acceptable as well. Ideally in real time would be even better, but we're asking for preferred that some methods may be, multiple methods may be doable.
Okay, thank you. There was one question that snuck in. You want to address that now, or will we address that via email?
I think you can go ahead. I'm assuming
Okay.
some people may have to drop off the call, but that's okay.
Okay, no worries. Regarding the HRR mapping in the application form, at what level do we explain how our project maps to the risks and gaps? Under each risk, there are active and completed tasks. Do we comment on these tasks, or will our project become a task and we are explaining where the task would best be located or listed in the various risks and gaps?
We won't be able to tell you how the project would be integrated into the HRR, but there are risks for SANS. So those are the risks that we are targeting for this solicitation. Anything you want to add, Jimmy or Mohammed, to that?
Just be able to explain how you're doing relates to the risk.
Okay, thank you. That's all of the questions.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope that your questions were answered, and if they weren't, please feel free to send a question to the Space Health-info email, and we will post these slides along with the recording in a few days, alongside the solicitation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.